In 2020, a documentary related to a road in Flowery Branch, Georgia named Jim Crow Road was filmed. Several residents were interviewed to discuss their opinions on whether that name should be changed. During those interviews, various perspectives on race were shared. The following film further explores those points of view.
I just like people, and I don't see color.
Racism's not been part of my vocabulary, and so I didn't. I don't see color.
I hate the phrase "oh, colorblind." I'm not colorblind. I'm like, you look at a person and you know what color they are when you look at them.
I don't see color, so I'm not going to get into a fight with someone because they want to scream and yell at me over something that I'm not.
And when I told her that, she said, "Carol, you're the worst kind because you don't know what we've been through." She was black. And I said, "But I wasn't the one. I never had slaves."
I don't judge anybody. I mean, if you're nice, I'm nice to you. I don't care what color, race, X, Y, whatever. It's, we hang out with the demographics of different age groups, different social economic groups, and as long as you're a nice person, more power to you.
I know they had a hard time and went through a lot. I mean, you know that from history. But I didn't have anything to do with it, and I'm sorry it happened, but I think some of them can't get over it. Maybe parents or grandparents have drilled it into their head or something.
I tell people all the time, it's important that we're color brave and not color blind. Being color brave is much, much different from being color blind. When you're color blind, you don't see color. You say, I don't see color, but everyone sees black and white. So being colorblind is not really a doable thing.
I think the answer is, quite honestly, in teacher education programs. That's where it starts. It starts with their training and how are they being trained. And so we spend a lot of time helping them, again, confront, become aware, because it starts there. And then once you're aware of things, what are you gonna do about it? There's a cultural competency continuum. And in the middle, it's 1 through 5, and 1 is cultural incompetence, and it's basically you're extremely intolerant and you don't realize that there are differences, or you refuse to recognize differences, stuff like that. And then obviously on the far right is acceptance. Not only do you accept that there are other cultures, you take purposeful opportunities to engage with other cultures and truly learn about them and learn what benefits they bring, and all that kind of stuff. In the middle is color blindness. Well, a lot of people will say color blindness like it's a positive thing. We talked in our program about how it's actually you're inherently denying part of who that person is if you say that you don't see their color, because their colored their life experiences. Because this person is black, they had different experiences than you throughout their life, and that has a part to do with who they are, how they filter experiences, how they feel certain things in an experience. You may both go through the same activity and experience something totally different because of prior life experiences, and your color has something to do with who you are. It is part of who you are. So to say that you are colorblind and you don't see color, you're actually denying a part of who that person is. And so we have a lot of conversations about that, because a lot of the students will come in and be like, well, I'm colorblind, I don't see color. And they're saying it as a very positive thing, and we get what they're saying. And that's not a bad place to start, but it's certainly not where we want them to end.
But it was history, and it was a class being taught by, my accredited school system. And I never really considered that history can be slanted or not necessarily altered, but can be presented in different ways with things left out and, things highlighted. And you can present it in so many different ways. As an adult now realizing, you carried that childhood fantasy around for a long time, but because of course he can. Anything regarding human behavior is going to be presented with the beliefs of the speaker or of the writer or the teacher. So that was interesting to have that revelation at my age.
We are doing a cookie cutter racism or a Black History Month thing. My youngest son, Tyler, who is white, my little guy came in the house, 7 years old, just bawling and crying. My teacher told me that y'all were slaves and we were white people and we made y'all slaves and we were very mean to you. I looked at the calendar. It was Black History Month, of course. Probably learned the story of Harriet Tubman or somebody. And I thought to myself, that was the first time I ever argued against Carter G. Woodson, the guy who started Black History Month. I said, this has to stop. He learned that he was my oppressor, and that broke his heart. He just started hating his whiteness. And I don't need his self-esteem to go down. I don't need anybody's self-esteem to go down. I don't want my self-esteem to go down. I want to teach celebratory Black history. Those are the stories that need to be told. Not the stories of slavery. The stories that uplift Black people, that show we are the same. That's the only way you're going to stop racism, because I don't need my children learning us versus them. I need them to learn us, Americans.
I have been around people that were racist towards other people. I am aware that in my family history that some people were racist, some people were Klansmen. My study of history says that, racism wasn't exactly a negative thing way back in the day. Like, it was considered enlightened. The scientific minds of the time would say that, people are scientifically different than another. It is an evolution of thought to understand that racism is bad, and that we are all the same.
How I've seen it taught in a co-curricular perspective is I see a lot of crossover between history classes and language arts classes, because a lot of literature, of course, is influenced by what was going on at the time period that the literature was written. And so it's a natural conversation to have when you're teaching literature to students, to talk about the context in which the piece was written. And so there's a lot of canonical, pieces out there that have an element of discrimination, social injustice, things like that. So, and I think that on the whole, teachers do a wonderful job to bring that piece in and make it a focal point of teaching, because it's the relevant piece that still exists today. Even though there has been progress in some areas, we have other new areas of different types of discrimination going on. So social injustice, there are several different types of it going on. And even though some of that may have, shifted in what those things are, it's still going on. It's still an issue in society today. And so I think that a lot of the time those topics are approached by educators as a way to talk about what's going on in the world. And it's not this thing that happened a long time ago that's outdated and doesn't really affect us now. It very much affects us. And all of that, we touch on the idea of social injustice and what baggage are you bringing to the table as a teacher? What biases do you have? How do you confront those biases? How do you handle the biases that your students come with? How do you overcome those to be a learning community that not just tolerates, but accepts cultures that are different from their own, and how do we move forward, you know, in those, and how does that affect the learning environment, stuff like that. So it's always a topic of conversation in like where I teach, because of the nature of what we teach and the fact that you've got to teach whoever walks in your classroom, and they should all be given a fair chance, and you've got to confront whatever might get in the way of that.
I was 4 years old the first time I saw a man get shot. Tell me what age it was when you watched the police run into somebody's house and bring out a body bag.
It would be so easy for me to be accused of something that I would have to spend every dime of my life savings to get out of. And even if I wasn't convicted, I don't think people understand what comes behind that. The fact that I may have had to mortgage my house to pay for legal fees, or I lost my vehicle and now I can't go to work because I was in jail for 2 weeks and they fired me, and then I didn't make my car note, and now my car is repossessed. Now I can't make it to work. Now I don't have a job. People saw me on the news. I'm a concealed weapons license carrier. It would be so easy for the wrong cop to see my gun, shoot me for no reason, when I'm licensed to carry. We're just not awarded the same luxuries.
Yeah, but you can also turn it around. There are some white people that never had privileges either. I mean, some of them grew up poor and never had anything and didn't have the opportunities.
We take them out into the lawn on campus, and it's called the Privilege Walk. And they all start on the same line. So you've got every culture that's at GGC, and it's extremely diverse. You've got traditional students that are right out of high school. You've got non-traditional students, so students who are 50 and have families, and they've decided they want to go to school, or they want to go back to school after having, changing careers. They decided they want to teach, We have students who are living in their cars. We have a ton of first generation students, so we have a lot of diversity specifically at our college. And so you think about the people that are on this line in one class. And so what they do is they get asked a series of questions, and if the answer is yes, they move up. And then at the end of the list of questions, historically, the people who are the furthest in the back of the line are Black males. And it's a powerful visual of the advantages that other folks have gotten along the way, and they may not have even realized it.
Y'all can't look at my life and try to compare my responses and my reactions to yours. You don't know what I experienced, and you don't know what I stand under.
I kept sending in my resume. I kept applying. They kept throwing it in the trash until my wife walked in there. My white wife. I would not have gotten my last job if my wife didn't speak up for me. And that's interesting. I'm afraid that no company would ever want to hire me if I speak out. So many of us don't. That, again, is the systemic racism that we face.
Part of it goes back to our indoctrination and our conditioning. We don't want to rock the boat.
That fear governs our lives. We know at any given moment, you could be reduced.
When I actually developed relationships with people that were of a diverse background, I think that did a lot more for changing your opinions.
Like if you were to Google Privilege Walk, you could probably see some videos that folks have done on it, and it's because it's like an educational activity that's like known. So, I mean, you could probably read and like find out what are the specific questions that are asked if you were interested in learning more about it. And I actually interviewed one of our students, and he stated like what he got from that. He was a Hispanic male. He's first generation college student. And because what was powerful for me was that, yes, I'm at the back of the line. Yes, I've had to overcome stuff, but I am still here and I'm in the same class that they are, and I'm going toward the same degree, and I'm going to have the same opportunity. You know, I'm going to have the opportunity to also be a teacher and, you know, to kind of change my path and everything. So that was a really powerful learning experience for him. And I will tell you that a lot of the white male students are very upset by the activity. They take it very personally, that they feel, some of them feel like it's not my fault that I was born white male. And so the debrief of the activity is one of the most powerful. It's almost more powerful than the activity itself, because what is your takeaway from this? What are the implications of where you ended in the line? What does this mean for you? What does this mean for the person who's 10 feet behind you? And so all of that comes out in the class conversation, and it's just a really powerful experience.
I don't think that my perspectives have been challenged. I've never had anybody come up to me and say, well, why would you think like that? And I've never been in a situation where that conversation was a conversation that needed to happen.
One of my girls, I can't remember which one, but like a year or two ago, they are in after school daycare. She's just stating a fact that she played with this girl and she was brown. Like, do I say no, she's African American, or do I not say anything? Because right now she's just saying, she's a 5-year-old and she's saying this person's skin is brown, and that's all that means to her. It doesn't mean anything. There are no implications about the privileges this person may or may not have. And so so my husband and I talk about that, you know, after they go to bed. Well, should we say anything? Are we overanalyzing? Are we underanalyzing? So it's not an easy task.
But I never felt that people judge me by the color of my skin. And I know it sounds crazy, and I've tried to rethink it, because I'm like, you look at me and you know I'm black, you know, but anything that I've tried to do, if I did it, I felt that I did it because I earned it. And if I didn't get it, I didn't think it was because it was the color of my skin. It was because I didn't work hard enough, or it wasn't for me. When I was married, my husband was a hotel executive. And there was a lot of times that we were the only blacks in the room. And I never felt out of place. And, you know, I never felt like, oh, I'm different because I'm the only black. And if people looked at me, I never felt like they were looking at me because I was black. I really felt that they was looking at me because I was dressed so fabulously. So, you know, no, I don't, you know, no. And, you know, at the age I am, I guess that's something to say. Either people would say either she's stupid or she's naive.
I have a little bit broader perspective of it because I wasn't born this way. You know, I had a stroke 4 or 5 years ago. And so when I encounter people that assume something about me based on my appearance or based on my functionality or whatever, you know, I understand that it is a misunderstanding, because I was once naive to a great many things, you know. So that's a basic misunderstanding. I'm a little bit more accommodating of it than somebody who has never been on the other side, you know. But I can understand both sides.
I hated white people and I hated being black. I hated white people because of the dominance of the society, and I hated black people for accepting it. What I was seeing and what I was experiencing was not what everybody else is seeing.
In the black community, there is a thing with, you know, light skin and dark skin people. Sometimes there can be a prejudice. You know, when I was in school, I had a couple of girlfriends that were light skinned, and they said that it was hard for them to make friends because the dark skinned kids felt like they felt better than the rest of us. And sometimes they do.
My grandmother was, I don't know if she was proud to be black. I really don't. I think she was proud to be who she was. And I think she kind of looked at herself as not necessarily black, but an American. And you find that a lot in these days when you see people who say, I don't see color. My grandmother did not see color, per se. She did not want to, even though I'm sure she was forced to in her time growing up. given where we came from and the discrimination she faced. In the Jim Crow South, African Americans could purchase things from stores, but they weren't able to return them, and they weren't able to try them on. So if you couldn't try on clothes and you couldn't return what you bought, you were stuck with what you had. That's why my grandmother always made all of our clothes. I grew up in a very mixed time. My mom always had whites and blacks over. I never saw anything as a child that would tell me not to interact, or we didn't interact, because this is what my community looked like. So facing racism myself is very difficult for me, because I don't understand why. I don't understand it because I didn't see it. Everything that I know about racism was a taught thing. We're not born segregating ourselves because on the basis of race. We're not even born segregating ourselves on the basis of gender. When I was 25 and facing racism, kind of astonished that these things were happening, because this wasn't the world I grew up in.
My grandmother, my great-grandmother, my great-great-grandparents were all born in America. So I don't have any ties with Africa. I know that I'm not an African American. You know, I don't know if you call yourself a European American. So I don't identify. So people, sometimes I get away with it, sometimes say, well, you have to check something, you know. So I will check black, but if I'm in a sort of a feisty mood, I usually put American.
Eight minutes and 46 seconds. For the first time, somebody like you got a chance to experience what I experienced growing up. You got a chance to watch somebody die. And that messed up the world. This wasn't a television show. He didn't get up after they said cut and went home. And everybody today that watched those 8 minutes and 46 seconds knows that they have now watched somebody get killed. And that's not a normal experience in this country. And see, because these people are so sensitive to that, and that sensitivity is not a negative thing. That sensitivity is actually about civilization. When was the last time you walked out back and cut a chicken's head off and defeathered it in order to eat it? See, killing used to be a part of everyday life. And so it meant nothing. And because it's not a part of everyday life now, it carries a different connotation. People ain't used to it. And so all over the world and all over the United States, at 8 minutes and 46 seconds, people who had never seen people die before saw it. That went beyond their ability to think. That went beyond their ability to feel. It went straight to their spirit, and that's what you're doing.
I work with a very diverse group of faculty, and so when a lot of this stuff happened, like one of my best friends that I work with is a black female, and she has a teenage African American son. Well, the conversations that she was having to have with her son were very different from the conversations I'm having to have with my 5 and 8-year-old white daughters. It's not an option for her. Or it could be, if she made it an option, it could have really dire consequences. My husband and I struggle with what is the right age to have some of these conversations, and some of the things that have happened in the news that are happening to teenage African American men that our girls have no idea about. What is the appropriate time in their life to talk about those things, especially if they haven't seen them on TV, because they don't watch the news, they don't have social media accounts, so they're not seeing a lot. They don't know that a lot of that. So are we doing them a disservice to hold off on those conversations, or is it time to have those conversations? How young is too young to have that conversation?
The media has made it stink crazy. They have divided this country like nothing I have ever seen in my life. It's horrible what we're seeing.
If we're going to come together, if we are going to reach some sort of consensus and work forward, then we have to accept that the worst of any particular group does not speak for the whole group. And so we should challenge ourselves to find common ground with people and understand each other.
Our Black Lives Matter movement has never been about denigrating anyone else. The Black Lives Matter movement has always been about uplifting the Black lives. It's never been about saying white lives don't matter. It's never been about saying brown lives don't matter. It's never been about saying yellow lives don't matter. What it's been about saying is, hey, Black lives matter.
Years ago, you didn't see a protest with a mixture of people. You saw either one group or another group. Now you see a mixture of people.
Inclusivity is the key to any type of protest. When you see Americans side by side of every ethnicity asking for change, change comes. That's the important key. They're bringing to light things that white people never thought of before. And this is our next generation of parents. This is our next generation of Americans, of doctors, of lawyers, of politicians. And they will provoke change, and they will demand change, and they will make change happen.
Right after 9/11, I don't know if you remember, there were a lot of commercials, and they had all these people from every color, every nationality, every culture, and they would all stand up and say, I'm American, I'm American. And I was like, finally, we're all American. And then all of a sudden we slipped back into the titles again. But it was, everybody stood up and says, I'm American, I'm American. And I was like, that's what we are Americans. You know, when I go to another country on vacation, they say, are you American? They look at me, they know I'm black. But they say, are you American? You know, they don't ask me, well, are you black?
Common sense is not that common. If you understand that normal is only what you think normal is. It's only normal to you and your home and your people and your community and your family. So when we know this, that normal is different for every single person, when you forget about it, you inflict your normal on me, and you expect me to act like you, and you expect me to be like you, and you expect me to talk like you.
So the argument I always use is based on critical thinking. It is, you play devil's advocate with something, you say, you know, this is my opinion, so this must be the other person's opinion. You know, if I want somebody to consider what I have to say and, you know, accept that it is honestly my opinion, then I must also assume that what they're telling me is their honest opinion, and I should accommodate it. I think that a lot of people struggle with that. They have a egocentric mentality of, you know, the way I'm perceiving the world based on my experience is the way that everybody perceives the world, and that's just not the case.
For a good man to become an evil one, all he has to do is nothing.
And it's hard sometimes, because sometimes I feel like white people feel like they can't talk, they don't feel like they can intelligent, like that it's not fair for them, or who are they to have conversations about race, if that makes sense. And so, and a lot of our white students feel that way, that they feel like they aren't allowed to have, not that anyone's making them not allowed, but that they don't feel comfortable having a voice and speaking out for the underprivileged or the discriminated against and things like that. Does that make sense? They feel like they might come off as like elitist, or, I mean, I get what they're saying. I'm like, no, you can be informed and you can have conversation, you can have dialogue about it.
Understand that this country is a melting pot. And the more that we're color brave and we talk about our differences, the more we can get along.
If I keep my mouth shut about the racism that's going on, the racism is going to continue to go on. Now, if I point out the racism and leave it at that, the racism is going to continue to go on. That's what happened in the 60s. So I must become aware of it, I must acknowledge it, and then I must monitor it. Because what you have to understand is that this is an operating system. And when you change an operating system, then you have to monitor it to make sure it don't go back to the way it was. So yeah, we got to talk about it. As a matter of fact, in healthy relationships, you talk about everything.
So we can't leave it alone. We have to tend to it. We have to tend to color.
Unless there's action. And there has to be action. Then everything you're doing is just pointless.
We can always learn more, and we need to learn more, and we got to keep the conversation going.
Your age group, you all don't seem to have that color thing that we had. You know, I mean, definitely they was black and white when I was coming up, but my sons, they, you know, their friends is a mixture. You know, my youngest son actually does not have any black friends. His girlfriend is white, all of his friends are white, his roommate's white. If we don't put our ideas into their head, I think that they're starting to move. So I guess to say we are moving forward. Yep, and I'm gonna keep praying that we move forward and that I stay here long enough to see it.